Hello, I'm Paul French, Director of Southern Oregon Repertory Singers, and I'm here with composer, pianist Will Todd as part of our series of Glimpses of Beauty, conversations with singers and musicians and composers. And today we have one of my favorite composers, actually, Will Todd. I took a small cursory look at the pieces I've done by you, and I think there's like 14 or 15.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Is a lot. So it's a thrill for us to have you here to chat a little bit.
Sure, it's lovely to be here, and I have very fond memories of visiting you all a few years ago and performing with you. And we would have been performing again, wouldn't we, in very shortly?
Right.
But sadly, that is in the ether for now. But great to see you again, Paul.
Well, we'll talk about that. Will is referring to our commission, big commission, that was supposed to be performed around this time. We thought we would we would have this interview instead. So the piece is extraordinarily beautiful. So we're going to have a great interview to fill that void. Well,
No problem. I'll do my best.
uh, the piece he was referring to was he came and we did Among Angels. So I don't know if I told you the story of learning about that piece. I'm a big fan of James McMillan, and I bought the 16's recording because I noticed that he was listed there. Such a great time in choral music, all this fantastic music being written. In any case, I was listening to the CD and it got to Among Angels, and I'm pretty sure I cried. I mean, it got to that we carry you,
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
and I just went, "Oh my God, who is this? Who is this guy?"
Oh, I didn't know that actually, Paul. But I suppose what you're describing in a way is what, as composers and writers, it's what we're always striving to do, which is to create moments of beauty or moments of drama, passionate moments, if you like, that will resonate with people. When they hear it, and I mean, we'd never met at that point, so it was only the music that was talking between us. Um, you know.
Well, the rest of that little story is that then I started buying vast quantities of your music. I have a lot of your pieces, and Beth, who I think is she's one of your publishers, is
She's my colleague. She's also my wife, and she sends her very best wishes to you.
I
Uh,
I didn't, and she's a singer.
she's a singer. She was a singer. She's retired from singing now, and she sang "The Mass in Blue" famously. That's what she did. And
I
when we
read
did the first ever, the first recording of that was with her singing. So we used to perform that piece a lot together. But she's like behind the scenes now, moving my arms.
that.
But she sends her best wishes to you, Paul, as well.
that that's really fun to learn that. Well, my memory is that I sort of bought so much music that she emailed me sort of like a good grief. Who are you? And
Right.
Will's going to be in the U.S. And gave me the dates, and it was far enough out that this happened that uh, I realized, well, that's right around the time we would be doing a concert. And so I programmed for the second time that Among Angels, which there's so much great music. I don't have a rule about it, but I'm usually doing new pieces, but to have you here and to work with choir, and it's, well, congratulations on the piece. It's an extraordinarily beautiful piece.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a commission for the 16, and because it was written for the 16. It's not the easiest of pieces, is it? It
You
has.
notice that?
Yeah. Um, and this is a kind of thing that choral composers experience because um, often the pieces of ours that get done the most might be the easier ones for the pure and simple reason that more choirs will be able to do those pieces. So my carol, My Lord Has Come, is done by many, many, many choirs. It's just in 4 parts. It's a very simple
No, no,
piece.
I've done it many times. I love it. It's wonderful.
And but it doesn't call for the skill level that Among Angels does. Because there's 8-part writing in there. You've got the 2 harps. So I'm so thrilled. It gets performed a bit more now than it did, but compared to Mass in Blue or pieces like that, it's performed much more rarely. So it was a big treat to come and hear your choir do it.
Well, not a lot of, I think it's the only piece I've done that had a movement in, what is it, 22/16?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Da 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 da. Bring out light. Da 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 da. Do
Yeah.
you know? It's funny those things because you always try and write things in the simplest way possible. But I think that with that measure, I just worked out that if I put it in lots of separate bars, it ended up being even more complicated.
Hmm.
Do you know? So I just thought, let's make this one really complex bar, and then it's over and done with.
Well, I don't want to think about it being more complicated than it was. Um, well, so, you know, it's not just that piece. I didn't mean to get sidetracked just on that piece. I think you're writing, well, you said it's what composers set out to do, but I think that's not completely true. A lot of composers, that's not that's not their goal. I teach music history here at SOU as well as you know many other things, and we just finished up a unit with Franz Liszt, which is sort of in the public concert era uh, when the avant-garde really rears its ugly head, and I guess I'm betraying my own views. Uh, and your music is so obviously meant to be beautiful as opposed to the sublime, the music that cows you. And Richard Truscott says the modern church is the concert hall where we go to worship the 200 pieces that have been deified and feel small in front of them, and that whole movement, as opposed to composers that write beautiful music that obviously they want the audience to enjoy. And that doesn't have to mean that you're pandering. And I'm so defensive because the music community, I imagine you get a little of this, especially with your whole interest in jazz and
Yes,
music.
it does. I mean, in my own journey, going back to when I sort of came to my music, I started by just improvising on the piano as a small child, and this is before any lessons. So literally experimenting on the piano, and of course the piano is a fantastic instrument to experiment on because it's laid out in patterns, and it's quite easy to get notes out of for a little child. You press and you get notes, and this led to me being primarily in my piano playing an ear player. So hence the jazz side comes very naturally to me. It's very easy for me not to have music in front of me. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I get a bit stressed when you put actual music in front of me and expect me to play the actual notes at the actual right time. I'm like, yeah. But if we can be free, then I'm very happy. But I think that started a journey for me with a very wide interest in music, and this ranged in listening in our house when I grew up through opera, through jazz, choral music, musical theatre, pop music, and rock music. And I loved it all. There's such great music in all of those genres. And when I went away to university, it was the first time I encountered this sort of harder edged avant-garde sound worlds. And on that particular course, this was at Bristol University, that we were very much encouraged to write in that style. And I found it really hard to do, not because it was technically hard. I understood how to do it, but I struggled to express myself in that way, and I ended up in a bit of a sort of tension with some of my tutors, because they always wanted me to hand in for my portfolio the sort of serial piece, the hard-edged 12-note row piece that I'd spent about a day on, and just moving the notes around without any feeling whatsoever, rather than a piece that I'd slaved over, like a little anthem. Now the reason why I mention that, Paul, is that this isn't about right or wrong, really, is it? Because there is some astonishing music and very beautiful music written with an atonal mindset. But I think there's a limit to what you can control as one person. And for me, the backbone of my thinking is a tonal language. And I had to kind of put aside that more dissonant thing, and just focus on what I can do. For me, I use dissonance as an ingredient to create drama or to create darkness from which I can come back into light. But I'm tending to think of that dissonance as being moving away from the consonants, as opposed to the whole language in its own right. I digress slightly.
Well, no, I mean it's what you value and it comes through. I think dissonance can also be color, which it is in jazz.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yes,
Or Debussy, or
yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't necessarily promote anxiety.
No,
How it's voiced.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, quite, because we can experience a sort of dissonant sound world that's incredibly beautiful. Debussy's a very good example. There's an awful lot of adjacent harmony going on, and it's gorgeous. It's like sparkling snow. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, I think you have to find, as a composer, the way that you sparkle, the way you make your sparkling things. And this has been different for all sorts of different composers. And for me, it's you alluded to it earlier when you said, "We carry you on soft white wings." It's actually very much melody led, my music. And my first compositions were all songs, sad songs to girlfriends who didn't like, well, who I wished were my girlfriend but wouldn't be, sort of thing. Songs of longing, excruciating songs of longing. And so thinking there about, a vocal line against a harmony, because there's lots of different ways you can construct music, of course. And I think at the core, I'm always thinking in that way, what is the melody and what's the harmony, even in very complex textures where you don't have a discernible melody.
yeah. Well, turns out we like melodies.
Yes, we do.
Schönberg, what did he say? In 50 years, the postman will be whistling my music. Well, that
Yeah.
didn't happen.
No, and it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because the song form, which is a very ancient form and has always been very appealing, it seems, to human beings. The idea of the relatively short song, where there's only a limited amount of material in it, and it's probably repeated quite a lot. This exists in so many cultures, in so many musical styles, in so many musical tunings and languages. It strikes me as being one of those things that's just kind of, it works for us as organisms to have this small musical journey that we go on in a song,
Mhm.
which is rather different from the musical journey we go on in a symphony, which is a much bigger thing. There's something very satisfying about that simple form. It comes with perils, of course, because you can be accused of being simplistic. But of course, simplicity is not being simplistic. They're not the same thing. And I'm always striving to find the simple way to get the idea across.
And in the classical world, you know, if people like your music, you're not tough enough, kind of a deal.
Yes. Well, there was a guy in my in the year above me, no, 2 years above me at university, and I was terrified of him because we used to come in and show our compositions in a kind of seminar, and he wrote very hard-edged music, and if anybody had any kind of sort of triadic harmony in their pieces, he would start shouting, and he was from Yorkshire in England. And so he would say, "I can't stand this tonal slush." I will translate for the benefit. So he's saying he couldn't understand this tonal slush, but said in this Yorkshire. And I was terrified, because I would go in with something that had a recognisable chord in it, and he'd be like fuming.
Schoenberg late in life confused the hell out of his students by saying things like, you know, I think there's still a lot of good music could be written in C major.
Yeah, and I know that quote, and I love it. I think it's very interesting, actually, as well, because it reminds us that music is just as much about when notes happen as which notes happen.
Mm-hmm.
Timing, actually, for composers is the biggest deal of all.
Mm.
Really, what we're doing when we write music is we are deciding the timing of notes, when they happen, when they resolve or produce tension with each other, when they move away and when they move back. All of those things are timing issues. I feel very fortunate to be someone who's played a lot of music in front of people, because I have found that helps me have a sense of musical timing just in real time,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of it in real time. And I find that helps me when I'm composing, because of course you don't write things down in real time. You have to sort of predict how it will go and then write everything down. But we all know pieces of music, or we've experienced pieces of music where the timing sort of breaks down and something goes on for too long,
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't happen enough, moves on too quickly. And in that sense, it doesn't matter how amazing the harmonic language is then. Musically, it doesn't work because music is a time-based art form.
Yeah. Yeah. And the timing has a direct impact on the mood. And I've heard you say that really, I mean, you start by improvising, then trying to find a few chords and the mood to fit the text. I guess that implies you start by finding a text, which is probably the hardest part, isn't it?
Yes. No, you're right. The way you've described that is true. I tend to start at the piano, trying to find the world that this piece needs to be in. I wish I was better at it, because sometimes I can have a whole day's worth of ideas and nothing seems to be right, and that's a rather frustrating day at the office. And then there are very nice days where you sort of things seem to come together much quicker. But in essence, I guess I'm trying to sort of inhabit the piece before it's fully formed in a kind of fragmented way. I can give you a very good example, actually, which is My Lord Has Come.
Mm.
Because I was sat here at this very piano and I'm thinking about Christmas, about the idea of a carol, of a promise. And I'm also thinking about being inside Durham Cathedral, which is a building I know very well. It's where I grew up. So I'm imagining these sort of drones in a very big space. And then literally sort of improvising plain song over the top. And because I was thinking about that big acoustic, I could feel like that C sort of bleeding into the B. And suddenly, with that, and I remember it very well, I had a sense that a whole piece can be made out of this phrase.
I love that piece. It's
Yeah.
so, I've done a bunch of your church pieces, and that one I've done in concert, you know, a holiday concert. Uh, I, um, yeah, and I guess for you, Christmas is another kind of birthday too, right? Isn't one of your daughters or?
Yes, it is. Yes, well remembered. Yes, our youngest daughter was born about 10 to midnight on Christmas Eve. She didn't quite go into Christmas Day. Yeah, so we have a very busy Christmas in this house because we have Rowan's birthday on the 24th, and kind of no mention of Christmas. And then it's like as soon as that's yeah, as soon as that's done and dusted, we sort of change the set to Christmas.
Well, so uh, then so you improvise and you think about the text and you find some harmonies, then a melody, then my understanding is then that you sing them.
I do, yes. I'm always kind of singing my way through these pieces, and when I start scoring the piece in detail, um, I'm always singing different lines, just because I know from my own singing life. You know, I sang in church choirs when I was young, and I've always enjoyed singing immensely. And you know, singers want to sing good lines.
Yeah.
They want lines, and one of the great powers of choral music is the sense of the singers singing through the line to the next note. So again, talking about timing, the way we construct our voice leading for singers is going to have a big impact on how emotive our singers are going to be. And we've all experienced that thing where we're singing a hymn and we've got the alto line. It's one of those lines which only moves up between note 5 and 6 for the entire thing, and you know it's all right, but you don't feel like you're being used to the full potential. And we can all think in pieces that we've sung of that lovely moment where our part, whether it's a tenor part or a whatever it is, sort of has a lovely moment. We love that. So I think I want the piece as I'm making it to be inhabited by strong singing lines that we will enjoy singing.
Yeah. Well, and that comes through. You know, I obviously, well, maybe some people start out wanting to be conductors, but I started out as you did, maybe later in life, doing serious music, but as a singer. And
Right,
so when I am looking at music, I'm also to program, I'm also singing it and
right.
feeling it's sort of the composition, it's the recreative process. There's the creative imagining it, but then I have to reimagine it, if you will, in my head to see if the piece works or not. And
Yes,
and
yes.
part of that involves singing it and imagining how are the singers going to feel when they sing this line. And if there's a moment like the "We Carry You" moment, that's enough for me. That moment,
Yeah.
the whole piece, which I enjoyed the whole piece, but that was the hook.
Yeah, good, good. And you know, and composers, I think, with again the timing thing, we're trying to make sure that when that moment comes in the piece, we've sort of kept our audience with us in the right way, so that when that happens, it's truly affects them
Right.
in a really strong way. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, I think, you talk about singing in church, that English have this incredible choral tradition. Who, the Netherlands, and Germany to a certain extent, but I feel like the English tradition is so important and vast, and it's a reason there's so many great English composers today. There you can't. There's so many that are writing wonderful music.
It's true. For the size of the place, there's an awful lot of music that comes out of it in terms of choral music, isn't there? And you're right. You know, although it's not probably as strong as it was when I was first singing music, by which I mean parish choirs don't always have as strong choirs as they used to, because musical styles have changed in worship, as you know. So some of
Right.
those churches will have moved towards a more contemporary musical worship. But there is this very strong tradition, and it's also backed up with the cathedrals and the music making that they do. Um, and yeah, it's inspiring. I remember sitting in Durham Cathedral listening to the cathedral choir when I was a kid. I wasn't in the cathedral choir. I was in a very good parish choir, um, and you know, just reveling in this sound of. I don't even know what the piece was, but it just felt like billowing sound going around the building of these voices. And I think the quality of the singing was so good that it really inspires you as a composer. If you're interested in composing, that's a very inspiring thing to hear.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. Sadly, that's not what's happening uh, very much anymore. Probably anywhere.
It's hard, isn't it? And I mean, you know, we know as musicians and people who have studied music history that this is the nature of music, that it evolves and alters and changes, and there's always stuff sort of coming in versus going out. Um, yes, it can feel like something is being lost, but I don't think that actually, because I think there's all sorts of exciting, particularly in this country, or I notice it in this country because I'm here a lot. Um, there's a kind of younger singer, choral singer, who's coming through who perhaps has a bit of a wider spectrum to their work. They're an excellent sort of classical choral singer, but maybe they can also do more kind of glee style as well, and they're very good rhythmically, and also aware that they probably need to be leaders as well, you know, so being good at leading amateurs. So there is a kind of singer around, sort of under 30 at the moment, coming through here that I work with quite a lot, and these are exciting people because they are blending things together, and
Yeah.
yet they can do a piece like Among Angels, you know, to the highest standard. So I feel whilst that's happening, you know, the tradition, whilst it may evolve, won't be lost.
Well, Tenebrae was here last year. Uh, yeah, last year, and did Path of Miracles.
Oh yes, yeah.
Abba's piece, which we just did. His latest the last thing I conducted was a year ago, March. We got the
Right, gosh, of course, yeah.
performance of A Sheet of Dew on Flowers. Uh, anyway, Tenebrae were here, and there were 17 of them, and they were phenomenal. I mean, that level of singer was, there's no other word. They're phenomenal.
They are completely a stunning group of singers, and you know, they are by their nature. You know, they're not just one lot of singers. There's a whole pool of them, depending on availability. So, you know, those singers exist here in abundance, really.
In
Uh,
London.
well, yes, in London, yeah, I guess, but in the kind of southeast area,
Sure.
maybe you would say. Do you know what though? You see, when I came through my composing, I had no access to professional choral singers singing my music for a long time, and then I've evolved and things have happened, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to write for many professional singing groups now. You know, and Among Angels, which we were talking about at the start, is an example of me being more elaborate and, in a sense, testing the singers harder. One of the dangers if you only write for professional choral singers is that your music can only be performed by professional choral singers.
Hmm.
Because if you know, if you write in 8 parts all the time, this will mean a lot of choral groups, even good amateur groups, might struggle to do those effectively. Some will, but it will definitely reduce. But I think worse than that, as a composer, it can make you lazy, right? It can make you very lazy. I'll tell you a story about My Lord Has Come. So I'm sketching it away on the piano here, and you know, in the nature of playing the piano, I'm playing quite big chords. Okay, quite big chords. So the original sketch of My Lord Has Come, the voice writing is in 6 and 7 parts throughout. Okay, and I decided, I said, how about I set myself the task of it has to be in 4 parts. You can't have 6 parts. So I have to rethink all these harmonies. You know, really, what are the notes that matter in this? And I just remember it being a very good exercise for me, for myself, and I've since mentioned it to a lot of students, particularly when they might show me a sort of 8-part piece, and I'm saying, well, you know, it's fine, but you know, you might not need this many parts to get as good an effect. And every time uh, you know, you divide your choir, you're losing something as well in terms of overall sound. I've tried to encourage younger composers, choral composers, to challenge themselves from time to time to strip the parts down, because I think it makes you a stronger composer. And sorry, this is a very lengthy way of saying, also writing for amateur singers can really improve you, because again, you have to maintain certain levels of simplicity that you might not with a professional group. So, you know.
Absolutely. I'll just throw in here, though, that the standards for choral singing in America are really quite high. The number of high school choirs singing very sophisticated, they're singing Messiaen, they're singing great music, then not to mention the university choirs. So then those people continue singing, hopefully in a group like repertory singers, and uh, it's those people can sing really well and sing professional grade music as well. My singers are going to be listening to this, so I have to.
No, I think I might have misrepresented what I'm saying. It's more, it's agreeing exactly with what you're saying, because, but my point is that actually professional choirs sing simple music really well as well.
Sure.
So we don't always need to write complicated to be effective. Um, sometimes complexity will be a very effective tool, but sometimes simplicity is a great tool. And then the better your singers are, it just gets better and better and better, doesn't it? You know, the soft pianissimo chord,
Right.
well sung, is just to die for.
Yes, it is.
Yes, the standard of singing in the US is fantastic. I mean, I've been coming regularly to the US since 2014 in terms of sort of visiting choirs, and I've had a fantastic experience in all of those grades that you mentioned, from high school through university. We're also professional chamber choirs. Um, you know, one that sticks in my mind is being in South Bend in Illinois one snowy February day. And I went into this high school group, and there was this little group of kids, and they were about to sing Mass in Blue with me for the day. And they looked like they were sort of, they looked tiny. They looked like they could never get through Mass in Blue, right? And they spent the whole day, they blew me away. They'd learnt this music. They had every line off by heart. It was one of the best experiences of rehearsing Mass in Blue I'd ever had. And these guys were like age 15 through 17. So yes, you're right. There are some amazing choral activities happening in the US.
Well,
Will your singers be happy now, Paul? Will they be right now that I've said that?
well, they're a happy group. I mean, they're not happy right now because nobody is. But uh, Mass in Blue, I want to uh, give you an opportunity to talk about that. I heard you say that you thought that was your coming out piece, as you found your voice with this jazz mass. I should say I'm trying to. Uh, I think it's too hip for me. I'm trying to work myself up to do it because I love the piece. It's great jazz, and it's an amazing. Well, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I mean, it is true that I say that about Mass in Blue. So, Mass in Blue is this work, setting of the Mass in Latin for choir, jazz ensemble, and soloist. And it was a commission, and I was asked to write this for a big band and a choir and a soloist. And up until that point, so I was about 32-ish, I think, when I wrote this piece. Up until that point, I'd tended to keep the jazz side of my life and the sort of classical choral side of my life, very separate. I was a kind of Jekyll and Hyde character, Paul. I'd be playing jazz gigs by night and writing choral music by day. And, my jazz colleagues wouldn't ever hear about the choral music, and my choral colleagues would never hear about the jazz. And of course, that's not a very healthy way to live, is it? And so in this piece, I had an opportunity to just throw those things together. The blues playing, which I've always enjoyed and done, as I said, improvising from the start for me, with a more formalised choral sound, drawing on a sort of English choral sound and a gospel jazz sound as well. Again, all those harmonies coming very naturally to me with my background and interest in blues music. And I remember sort of putting this piece together and thinking, well, this is quite fun. I like it. I think this is a good piece. But I remember saying to a friend who came to the premiere, we were just having dinner beforehand, and I said, people are going to hate this piece.
Oh,
They are going to, they're going to hate it. Now, composers are very paranoid people, and they always think people are going to hate their music, clearly. But I was dead certain that people were going to hate this piece. And I've been proved very wrong, because there have been hundreds and hundreds of performances of this, and that they've kept the Todd children alive. That piece has kept the Todd children alive. I would go as far as to say that I've sometimes woken up at night, Paul, and thought, oh my God, what would it be like if I hadn't written the Mass in Blue?
yeah.
So in that sense, because of its success, I began to think, why is this piece successful? And that is the spirit in which I say, I think I understood myself in it. Partly because I enjoy the risk taking of improvising. It's fun to me. That I know for some people, the idea of having to make things up in front of people would be the opposite of that. But to me, it has a lot of freedom to it. So there's that risk-taking side of my personality, but there's also that side of my personality that loves the sort of the order and the sheen of sound. And so in the piece, I just, without fear, I put those things together. So when I say that, I'm referring to the fact that I think I grew up as a writer then, believing that I could decide what I put together. Now, as you know, many pieces I've written since then are not jazz pieces, and some are, and some have inhabited worlds in between. And I'm comfortable with all of that. It'll just depend on the commission and the instrumentation, and these will be the factors at play. So it's not like I have to have jazz elements in a work, but I think it was that having that license as a writer to think I'm allowed to decide how the piece goes. I mean, it sounds silly, but going back to that training I had at university, I mean, my tutors were lovely people, but they were quite hardcore about saying this kind of music is sort of the right type of music and this isn't. And that's not a healthy place ever for creatives to be told that one thing is good and one thing is not good. Because what it does is it starts to make you, when you're writing, you have a little tutor on your shoulder saying, "Oh, I'm not sure about that. Oh, are you sure?" And writing's hard enough without doubting all the time, okay? So in Mass in Blue, I was able to just go, you know what? This is how this piece goes. And I always mark that of thinking that's when I kind of matured, if you like. Not that I'm very mature, Paul, really. I try.
Well, I think the labeling is really a mistake, and,
Sure.
and there's no reason for it.
No.
Why the music is music, and you should take from everywhere. Why not?
I agree, and I mean, I've done Mass in Blue with many choirs of different types. There's a type of a choir in the UK that we call the Choral Society, and often that choir will be an older group of singers, and this sort of people will think when they hear the word Choral Society, well, they only do the Messiah and the Mozart Requiem and da-da-da. So it's a huge leap for these choirs to do a work like Mass in Blue.
Yeah, the rhythms would be hard.
The rhythms are hard, but without exception, and I must have done 100 performances with choirs of that type in the UK alone. They love it, and they tell me if I stay in touch with them, they'll tell me things like, "Oh, we came back to the Nelson Mass, and we sang it in a new way." Because we'd got the energy of this, and from being a choral director that actually you push your choir in one direction to get something right, but then loads of good things feed back into other genres. So actually, you want to, if you can, try and do a wide range of music, because you'll be a better choir. I'm sure of that.
Yeah. Well, it's been a phenomenal success, I would say. I mean,
yes, it as I say, it sort of stuns me because I was so convinced when I said to my friend Ben that no one would like the piece. I really thought it and I meant it, and I have so much fun. And I'll tell you honestly, I've played it so many times, but I never get bored of playing it. Not least because I always do the piano part a bit differently every time, depending on the size of the choir, the level of the choir, the instrumentation, because there's different scorings. You can do it with just piano trio, or there's a big band version. All these things will change the acoustic, and I can kind of adapt what I'm playing. I mean, I'm not saying it'll never happen, but I've never not enjoyed playing the Mass in Blue yet. So if you do ever do the Mass in Blue and I'm around, I'll very happily accompany you, Paul.
Okay. Well, that'd be super cool. That shows you how old-fashioned I am. I still say things like super cool.
I think that's fine. I love the word cool. I think it's almost coming back in, isn't it? The word cool.
You wait long enough, right? So before we go, I'd like to, as a teaser to our audience, to have you talk about this piece that you've written for us, which is just beautiful. It feels to me, and we haven't talked about it, like a love song to the planet, kind of a piece. Though we'll do it a year from now, which it was for this festival that James Collier funded, this New Works Festival, which is always the first weekend of March. So we've missed it, but next year, hopefully we'll get to do music in the fall, but we'll do it a year from now. So what would you like to say about the piece?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm so thrilled that you're planning to do the piece, and it's very frustrating that we're not able to do it, but that pales into insignificance compared to all sorts of things that have happened to all sorts of people in the past year. But I can't wait to work on it with you guys. So it's called M equals PV. So this is an equation, a physics equation for mass. And so it grew initially out of my interest in the mass. And I've set the mass a number of times, Mass in Blue. I've set it in English. There's also another Latin setting that I've done. And the mass is something that I grew up singing in church, liturgy. So it's very sort of close to my heart and my thinking. But I like all of us, we find ourselves existing in a very secular world in many ways. And I've for a long time thought, how could I reimagine the Mass as I know it from sort of Christian worship, as something which sort of does a similar thing, but obviously doesn't use the language of God, and is not specifically Christian. There's all sorts of danger you can get into when you start to go down this path, because you can end up writing very diluted things. Well, that's my worry about it. So what I did, and I worked on this over a number of years, just sketching when I thought, was I created 6 secular texts that I have based on the texts of the Mass. Now, there's an awful lot of things that you need to... there's a lot of things that don't quite go across, because obviously the concept of God is a religious concept. And I'm also in this piece not trying to sort of make an exact copy. I'm trying to make something that is profound and might, in its own way, affect you like the Mass might if you were a Christian. Because lots of people singing Masses who aren't Christians and will enjoy singing them and will sing them very passionately, but it won't be out of a sort of their tradition, if you like. So here was an opportunity for me to sort of think about how can I make a piece that we can all sing? And you inevitably find yourself coming back to the laws of physics, or I do, the laws of physics, the laws of the universe, the fact that, one way of looking at our existence is to look at it in terms of, the chemistry and the physics of our existence. And that is the language that I've used in the piece. So it's in these 6 movements. It delights me that you've said it's like a love song to the planet, because that feels like the right thing. Of course, like anybody who sort of looks at it in detail, deeply concerned about our planet, and our children, of course, tell us even more to be concerned. So these are topics that really need to be thought about. And musically, following these 6 movements, so they're not called that, but in my mind there's a sort of Kyrie, Gloria, a credo. So the Gloria, which in the Christian tradition is a praise text, I create a praise text for sort of existence. In the creed section, which is about belief, that's thinking about the laws that govern the reality. So these different things that I've substituted. It was a big experiment, and I was so delighted that you were happy to go along with the concept, because actually, when I worked on the piece, it felt so right. I really feel very good about this piece. It came together very easily in the end, and I just can't wait for us to work on it.
That's true. And you wrote the poetry as well, which is amazing.
Yes, I did, and I don't. As you know, I've set many texts that are by either writers that I've worked with or by, dead people. Done plenty of that. But I've always written, going back to those pop songs about She Who Didn't Love Me back in the 80s. I've always written words as well. My Lord Has Come, of course, is my own text. And again, since the Mass in Blue, just that feeling of, sometimes I feel that I know what I want to write, and I can do it. And with this one, I felt like I could do it. Initially I was going to do it as a guide script and give it to a real writer, but in the end I thought, yeah, that's all right. I know what I'm doing. We'll see.
I've at this point commissioned a lot of music, and I have found that it's always best to give the composer free rein. I can't imagine composing. I wrote a little bit when I was young. I also wrote sad love songs to the girls who didn't love me. My high school days were with my guitar in my room, playing away to myself. Then I
Good.
briefly wrote things. However, I don't inflict my music on people anymore, which I think of as a sign of maturity on my part. But I admire composers, the people who bring, I'm a recreative person. I take works of art, and that's an important part of it too. But the people like yourself and my wife who create, to me, that's just amazing. And I feel like the best thing I can do is give them free rein and support what they do.
Well, it's wonderful when that happens, and actually, particularly with this one, because I'd been out and met your choir and heard them perform and do those wonderful performances when I was with you. Of course, it meant I felt really confident about what I could write. Because the choir, because they'd done Among Angels, so I'm like, well, not that this piece is in any way as difficult as that. But I just knew that the singing quality is strong, and that gives you great confidence. But yes, because the opposite happens sometimes with commissions, you feel very hemmed in
Right.
with the criteria for what it must be, and that can be a bit sort of because it's like sort of trying to fit things into the right holes. But here I was allowed to be me. So thank you, Paul.
We like you. And I just, in conclusion here, well, no, it's evening time, time for supper. I know you've had in your own family trials with COVID, and we wish you all protection and all the best, and to everyone to stay safe. We need to get through this, and when we can be together again, there's going to be a great outpouring of art and beauty, and this beautiful piece will be part of that.
Thank you, Paul. Big love to all of you, and I can't wait to connect with you all again.
Cheers.